What is going on, campers? Welcome back to my third installment of the Cryptid Camp tutorial series. This one, we're going to be covering advanced Cryptid Camp mechanics. We're going to be covering explorations. We're going to be covering expanded movement and exploration range, as well as battles. And if we have time, we'll cover the traits. So to kick things off, we're going to explain some advanced Cryptid Camp mechanics. And the first one I want to explain is how attack and defense works in this game. Because unlike most TCGs, attack and defense in this means a completely different thing. So, in your normal TCG, your attack is your attack and your defense is your defense or health. In this TCG, you need to imagine that this 10-5 cryptid is actually a 10. It's actually a 10-10 slash a 0-5. So the biggest thing about Cryptid Camp in the stats is that your cryptid's health is determined by what battle position it is in. We covered battle positions in the last episode. When you get into your adventure phase, that's when your battle positions matter. If you explore or your opponent explores you, you will be using the stats of your current battle position. So if you're in attack, then you have 10 attack and you have 10 health. If you're in defense, you have 0 attack and you have 5 health. This is going to take a little bit to get used to, but I promise you over time it'll come naturally. The next mechanic in Cryptid Camp I would like to talk about would be how damage floats. In this game, when you damage a cryptid with a source, either with another cryptid or with a memory, for example, damage is dealt to them until the end of the phase or until the end of the next exploration. Now, the next exploration basically means that you have to take advantage of it before you do any other action or end the phase. So unlike most TCGs, the damage doesn't float till the end of the turn. It just floats till the end of the phase or until the next exploration action is completed. Now, it allows you to move. You can still move other cryptids and the damage will float. But as long as you don't explore or end the phase, that damage will remain on your opponent's cryptid. The next concept I want to cover in Cryptid Camp is the +1/+1 and the -1/-1 counters. Now, in other TCGs, -1/-1 counters, when bringing your creature's stats to 0, primarily health, usually results in that creature being destroyed. However, in Cryptid Camp, this is not the case. So if I were to, say, for example, have a -5/-5 counter, so let's set this to 5, that would essentially make him a 5 attack, 0 defense cryptid. That does not mean he's destroyed, because remember, first of all, your battle position actually determines your health, not your defense. So if he's in attack mode, his health is actually 5. But with the -5/-5 counters, his health and attack are actually cut to 5. Because remember, the first -5 applies to the 10, bringing it down to a 5, making him in attack mode a 5/5. With that being said, what happens if he has -10/-10? Well, that makes him a 0, -5. Is he still destroyed, though? Or is he destroyed? No, he's not. So the way that -1/-1 counters work in Cryptid Camp is it can reduce your stats even to below 0. But until your creature takes damage from any kind of source, it is not defeated. So it doesn't matter how many -1s you stack on, you still got to deal damage with some kind of source, even if it's just one. The next mechanic I'm going to cover is actually like how self effects versus offensive effects work. I don't have the example cards with me, but I'll put them up on screen. And the two I'm going to use are the unique Bigfoot and the box devil. With these two on the screen, the effect that goes off first would be the Bigfoot's, because the Bigfoot targets himself first, or the Bigfoot's effect targets himself, while the box devil's effect targets your opponent. So this is a little grisly way to look at it, but it's kind of the best way I know how to explain it. But imagine you and your opponent's cryptid had guns. One was loaded with the buff that the Bigfoot has. The other one was loaded with the ability that the box devil has. The Bigfoot points it at himself. The box devil points it at the Bigfoot. The Bigfoot is able to shoot himself with the buff first before the box devil's effect is able to cancel out his buff. So self effects always go off before offensive effects. Okay, now we're about to move on to the exploration portion of this. And because we're covering that, we're going to cover +1s to movement and exploration range. Now, normally when you have a cryptid, it can only move one site at a time for its movement. One action is one movement, and that's it. If you receive a +1 to your movement range, that simply means that you can move an additional square. Now, it actually increases your range in a grid-like pattern, which I'll show on the screen now. But it doesn't mean you get to hop diagonally. It means you still have to do the movement of up and over. Now, when it comes to exploration, it's kind of different, because when you explore something, like let's say, for example, my Mothman gets one exploration tile. Let's say he wants to explore here. That's within range, no problem. Now, if you were to get a +1 exploration range, that extends his range to the back row. So I can now reach this. Also, if I were to be here, it extends his exploration range to here. So I can explore from here to here. But note that you don't actually move to explore. You can just explore from that far if you have +1 range. Perfect example is actually the Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman... Oh, my mistake. This is the wrong Headless Horseman. The Headless Horseman that is in the deck has +1 movement range. Let's see if I can find him real quick. Sorry about this. Oh, okay. So the Headless Horseman has +1 movement range and +1 exploration range. So this is the perfect example. I'll get him out of here. All right. So just like the grid-like pattern I showed for movement, that grid-like pattern also applies to exploring. But because you don't move when you explore, you do actually get to take advantage of a diagonal explore. Now, of course, there's going to be traits or abilities later on that allow you to explore in different ways as well. But +1 exploration range is simply a grid upgrade, which allows you to target further. Okay, now we move on to the big one, explorations. And the main point, or the main thing you're going to be doing in this game in order to gather evidence. So we'll start off with the most basic explore that you can do. an attack mode cryptid straight on an adjacent site that you can reach. And all that's going to do is get you to the evidence check. Now, what is the evidence check? The evidence check is how you figure out if you score any evidence points when you explore with a cryptid. So, if I were to announce that I'm exploring with my Headless Horseman onto this site here, I would then look at the evidence check. The evidence check says if all of the following are no, if you answer no to all of these questions, then evidence is found. So, is the site in your camp? No, because I explored a site in an opposing camp. Did your cryptid confront a defense mode cryptid? No, because there was no cryptid there, there was nothing there. Was a trap activated? No. Is there an entity in the site? Now, like we discussed in the last video, entities can be regular entities or hidden entities. But of course, if you explore a hidden entity, it's going to be flipped over and become a regular entity if it's paid for, or go to the graveyard if it's not paid for. And then the last step is trail check. If the site has a face down trail and it isn't yours, flip it up, applying its effects. So, if you announce an exploration with a cryptid in attack position on an empty site, you gain 1 evidence, and the trail flips over. Now, for the rest of the game, your opponent gains the bonuses of that trail. So any quartz cryptids that they play on this trail will have +2 attack and +3 defense. Now, what's the second most basic exploration you can do? Well, believe it or not, in this game, you can actually explore in defense mode. So, if your battle position's in defense, you can still explore, but remember, your stats are thus. So, the Headless Horseman's stats in defense are 0 attack, 9 health. So if there's a cryptid here, then you can't actually attack it because you'll be defending only. But because there is no cryptid here, we follow the same checks for evidence. And of course, the answers to all those are again no. It's not in our site. We didn't confront a defense mode cryptid. It wasn't a trap. And there's no entity there. So we get our evidence and we flip the trail. Now, the next kind can be, and let's go ahead and grab, we'll just grab Mothman here, why not? The next kind, of course, is if the cryptid's already played, then of course you know what's there, so you can explore directly into it. Now, if I have 11 attack, I could explore directly into this. I would do 11 to him, he would do 10 to me. I have 11 health, he has 10 health. However, we need to look into weaknesses and advantages. So this Mothman does an extra 3 attack against quartz. We're not quartz. I do an extra 3 attack against meteorite. We check those. Doesn't give either of us a bonus. So we go back to our original stats. 11 versus 10. I do 11. He does 10. I have 11 health. He has 10 health. He ends up destroyed in the discard. We check the evidence check now. Is the site in your camp? No, we explored the site in front of us. In their camp. Did your cryptid confront defense mode cryptid? Nope. He was in attack mode. Was a trap activated? Nope. Is there still an entity in the site? Nope. Because he was destroyed. So, I get evidence. And then, of course, we flip the trail. Now, notice that regardless, the trail check happens when an exploration happens. So if the site has a face down trail, like it doesn't matter whether you get evidence or not, the trail check happens. So you'll basically always be flipping the trail upon an exploration unless there's some kind of effect that allows you to not to. I believe Sinkhole Sam has an ability that makes it so that he can explore trails and not flip them, which is actually pretty cool. Because remember, flipping a trail is actually giving your opponent a boost. It's almost like a comeback mechanic in this game. And the next kind of exploration is going to be against a set cryptid. So when you go against an unknown entity, first you call your opponent to flip it, and then he has to pay his cost. So let's just say, for argument's sake, he has the 5 lanterns available to pay the cost. And then the battle will ensue. And of course, the same result would happen. So it doesn't matter whether it's a hidden entity or an actual cryptid entity. When you go into a battle, the same kind of battle is going to occur. The only thing is you just don't know what it is when it's upside down. So you're taking the risk of maybe it beating you. Now, of course, the next kind is if you try and attack a defense mode cryptid. Kind of knew that was going to happen. Let me lock this. Of course, if I attack this or I explore here, then we go into a battle. And of course, the battle sequence is really simple. So I'll cover it real quick right here. Resolve any effects triggered by the battle. So by any attack damage or anything like that, if they have effects on them that are triggered by that, of course you check for effects first, including the advantages. Then you check for battle mode, which is obviously really simple. Just, am I in attack? Are you in attack? And of course, this explains this. What I've been trying to explain down there is Cryptid's attack uses attack for both damage dealt and taken when they're in attack mode. When they're in defense mode, the Cryptid does not attack. It uses defense to determine damage needed to be defeated, or in other words, health. The battle sequence is all attacking Cryptids deal damage simultaneously. Then you end the battle. At the end of the battle, you remove damage done. Remove all damage from cryptids that were not defeated. And then you end the exploration. Now, if I explore here with this 11 attack, 11 health cryptid against this 0 attack, 5 defense cryptid, because it's in defense mode, it gets destroyed. I go to my evidence check. And of course, number 2 right there, we did confront a defense mode cryptid, so we do not get evidence, although we do destroy the cryptid. And of course, the other thing that we have are traps. Now, traps, you'll never face. Your opponent can't pay to play a trap on their turn, so it's always going to be a hidden entity. And of course, they can try and trick you by setting it in defense mode. There's nothing against that. It doesn't have to be a cryptid to be set face down in defense mode. So I attack into this. We find out it's a trap. They pay for it. That's the most important part, is that they have to pay the 2 vision in order for it to work. The effect of the trap happens, giving -2, -2 patches to all my cryptids. And of course, we check the evidence check. Was the trap activated? Well, it was. So we do not get evidence. Now, if we have a cryptid that's got enough defense to survive, let's see if I can find one here. What's this got? It's got 11 defense. That's not gonna work. But basically, if you attack with an attack mode into a defense mode cryptid and it survives, you don't get evidence. If you attack into a cryptid that has higher attack than you and you're destroyed, then you don't get evidence because the cryptid is still there, or there's an entity still on the site after the exploration. Now, is the site in your camp? What does that refer to? That's because if your opponent somehow manages to get cryptids into your site, which is possible through abilities, which we'll cover in the ability section, if you explore there to battle them, because you're exploring your site, you do not get evidence. And if you check the trail check, the site has a face down trail that isn't yours. So exploring in your own camp does not yield evidence or flipping of trails. Okay, in this section, we're going to go through the traits. There's a few, but there's not too many. So we'll flip through here, get to the traits. And here we are. If it'll let me click it. Okay. So we talked about the patches earlier. Patches is your +1, +1, and -1, -1 counters. All right. So exploration traits. These are traits that are going to help you explore in different ways. So we have the digger trait, which is this cryptid can explore sites with the same location number as this cryptid. So if you have a cryptid on site 6, you'll notice that your opponent's site 6 is on the opposite side. So it's kind of a good idea to keep track of the site numbers just in case. But yeah, if you had a cryptid in site 6 with the digger ability, he could explore right over here in this site 6. The next trait that we have is the flyer ability, like the Mothman. Actually, I don't think that Mothman has it. The other one does. But the flyer ability allows you to explore the nearest diagonal sites. Now, remember I mentioned earlier the +1 movement and the +1 exploration range? Those technically let you reach diagonal sites, and more so the exploration, because the exploration is kind of like a shot since you don't have to move for it. The flyer is actually what allows you to explore diagonal sites. So if you have a flyer, a cryptid with flyer, and he's in the middle, then he can explore these diagonal sites, or even these ones, really. Anything that's diagonal from is now in his range, as well as the normal top, bottom, left, and right. And the next trait is Swimmer. Swimmer can be a little bit confusing. Swimmer allows a cryptid to explore your opponent's back row, and it doesn't matter where they are. So if you have a cryptid with Swimmer and he's in the front row, you can explore the back row. But because you're in the front row, you can still also explore here. Now, if you have a cryptid with Swimmer in the back that doesn't have any additional exploration range, his Swimmer actually gives him the ability to explore all the way to your opponent's back row, even without any additional range, because it's the ability is what grants the exploration. So even though normally if sitting here, a cryptid can only explore here and here, Swimmer unlocks the back row of your opponent. Now Rush, this cryptid can explore a site within range once after completing a move action. So anything with Rush means that you're going to be able to, say you're in the back row with a cryptid, you could use an action for your movement, and because he has Rush, it doesn't use an action. So now you can still explore. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't use an action because it doesn't allow you to double move, but it allows you to explore after moving. All right, battle traits now. These are in combat effects. So first strike, very similar to most other TCGs I've come across. Normally, cryptids deal damage to each other simultaneously, but of course, a cryptid with first strike will strike first. So if they happen to deal more damage than your opponent has health, then the strike back doesn't occur. Next one is going to be damage traits. Okay, traits that apply when a cryptid deals damage. Okay, so far we only have one battle trait, which is first strike, and then we have 3 damage traits, or 2 damage traits right now. We have Bloodsucker X. This cryptid gives -X patches to a cryptid it damages, and when doing so, gives +X patches before defeat would be checked. That's the most important part of this, and it's kind of hard to explain, but let's just say we had a 5/5. Let's just go a 1/1, Bloodsucker 1 versus a 1/1. Well, in that combat, what would happen is you would give a +1/+1 counter before damage is even dealt, or sorry, before defeat is checked. So you do damage to each other. I do 1 to him. Now remember, as a 1/1, and see, this is kind of hard to remember when I'm explaining, but like as a 1/1, let's say they're in attack mode because they're technically 1/1 1/1s, right? Or no, they're technically 1/1s 0/1s. So let's assume that they're both in attack right now. The Bloodsucker one does 1 damage to the normal cryptid. The normal cryptid does 1 damage to the Bloodsucker cryptid. The Bloodsucker trait goes off, giving this cryptid -1/-1, and giving this cryptid +1/+1. Now, that would bring them both, or that would bring this one to a 2/2, and that would bring this one to a 0/0. In both attack and defense, but then it would ultimately make the attack of this one 0/0. And the defeat is then checked. So the damage was dealt when I only had 1 health, but the defeat isn't checked until after the +1/+1 counter is added. So because 1 damage was dealt, but now I have 2 health, I don't perish, and my opponent's cryptid does. So that's how Bloodsucker works. It's kind of complicated, but it's also a very good trait. Lethal is very good. This cryptid defeats any cryptid deals damage to, so it doesn't matter even if you just deal 1 damage. Boom, done. Defensive traits. Flash. Flash, this cryptid enters the site after being encountered. It cannot be attacked until the end of the turn. Basically what that means is if you have this as a hidden entity and your opponent encounters it and you pay for it, then it stops the attack completely and wastes that cryptid's turn, or wastes that cryptid's action because they tried to explore you, but the flash blinds you and stops you. Now, movement traits. This is what I was talking about when we're talking about moving into opponents' camps. So raid X, it'll have a number next to it. Same with Bloodsucker. The number represents how much of X, or how much evidence your opponent will get if your opponent defeats your cryptid within their camp. So you have to be very careful with your raid cryptids. Raid 0 is the best because that means that you have the ability to move through a rival's camp, but with zero penalty. The higher your raid, the higher the penalty for getting defeated in your opponent's camp. Hand traits. There's only 1 hand trait right now, and it is Swift. Whenever you can play cryptids, this cryptid can be played directly from your hand into one of your empty sites. That means that a Swift cryptid can completely ignore the requirements to be placed as a hidden entity first. And like the Headless Horseman here, can be played from your hand into an empty site. Swift is absolutely amazing. Companions all come with a pseudo Swift because, of course, as you know, when you play your companion, it goes directly to the field. So other than your companion, the only other cryptids in the game that can be played directly without having to be flipped first is Swift cryptids. Alright guys, that was my video tutorial series on Cryptid Camp. I might add one more to this to show you guys how to make decks and play them on Tabletop Sim here. That might be a video 4. But until then, I appreciate all of you for watching. I hope you guys were able to learn, or at least are able to try and start learning Cryptid Camp after watching this video. I know it's a lot to take in. It's a little easier for people that have played TCGs before. But there's still a few things in this that even I hiccup on, like the stats, for example. Remembering that a cryptid stats is actually kind of broken up into 2 sets of stats. But yes, I want to thank all of you again, and I will see you guys in the next video. If you have any questions, just put them in the comments and I'll try and answer them. Maybe I'll make a Q&A video as well. Maybe I'll bundle that together in the fourth video with how to make a deck on the website. But yeah, thank you all, and happy camping.